Today we are discussing another very significant and important concept called forgetting. Memory and forgetting are like two sides of the same coin. Without memory, you cannot understand about forgetting. Without trying to understand the forgetting, we cannot improve our memory. Hope you agree with me. Then, to understand as to why this forgetting occurs and how we can stop this forgetting, I think we have to first understand what forgetting is about. Just imagine like you don't remember day to day events. Every day is like a new day, every person is like a new person. How the world looks like, how the life looks like, definitely the anarchy and the chaos once again prevails. So, we can say without a normal memory, a human being will face severe difficulties. Forgetting can be defined in different ways. In simple form, we can say it is the inability to retrieve, but it can be defined as a poor storage of the information. It can be defined as encoding failure. It can be defined as failure to retrieve the information from our long term memory. In a nutshell, we can say if the three processes of memory have failed, that is encoding, storing and retrieval, naturally there is no question of remembering the information. Forgetting can occur when there is a breakdown of these three memory processes, that is encoding, storage and retrieval. However, sometimes forgetting is also like a blessing in disguise. We do not want to remember certain childhood experiences which make you feel very traumatic. So, we can say it is a boon, but at the same time, if you are remembering the information that which you have to remember, that creates frustration. I think this is a very common experience which you find in the examination hall or in an interview, where you have prepared everything, but unfortunately either because of your temperament or either because of the environment, you tend to forget, though the information has been studied by you. So, now let us understand what this forgetting is about. The first attempt to study and to understand about forgetting is taken up by German psychologist Hermann Ebbinghaus. He has become widely popular for his extensive studies on forgetting. In fact, 100 years ago he started this work, and now we are studying too many things about how and what we can do to improve our memory systems. In fact, the most interesting thing is Ebbinghaus himself was a participant for all of his studies, and he conducted the studies on memory by not using any meaningful words or meaningful material as such, because that may have some association and we may be able to remember in an effective way. So, what he did is he prepared a list of nonsense syllables. Nonsense syllables means which has no meaning, and he used the principle of CVC, that is consonants, vowel and consonant. For example, you can see this slide FYW. So, on both sides, on both ends you have consonants, only in between you have vowel. Similarly, BOZ. B and Z are consonants and O is an vowel. So, when I show you these nonsense syllables, automatically you cannot generate any meaningful associations with these nonsense syllables. So, he made numerous lists of these nonsense syllables and tried on himself under different experimental conditions to understand why this forgetting occurs. In fact, if you look at this slide, you will understand forgetting can occur at any memory stage, because as we process the information, we try to filter some information, we try to alter some information, or sometimes we may lose much of it. So, if you just look at this slide, at the sensory information, the information can be registered in a very detailed form. Much of the information can be encoded here, but by the time it is entered into the short term memory, only a few items are noticed and encoded, and by the time it enters into the long term memory, most of the items might have been altered or some of the items might have been lost. And when there is no clues from the environment, naturally we may not be able to remember some of the information, though it is present in the long term memory. So, depending upon interference or moods or retrieval cues, some things can be retrieved, some things may not be able to retrieved. Now, once we have understood briefly about what this forgetting is, let us try to understand the theories of forgetting. These theories helped us to understand there are a number of reasons why we tend to forget. So, the first theory is about the encoding failure. As I have already mentioned, if we have not encoded or registered the information properly, that information cannot be remembered. So, once again, if you look at this slide, there are number of external events bombarding on us, and only some of the information will be transferred to the sensory memory, and whatever is there in the sensory memory, if that has been attended to, only then that enters into the short term memory or working memory. And here, if it is properly encoded by effortful processing using the visual encoding or semantic encoding or any other form, only then that information enters into the long term memory. But at this stage, that is at the short term memory, if the encoding has been failed, naturally the information will be stopped here. The information will not be passed on to the long term memory. Another important reason is decay theory, or we can say storage decay. According to this theory, when we are seeing an information or hearing an information, that information gives an impression in the form of a memory trace. So, there will be number of memory traces in our brain for various, that is, the brain has different compartments for different parts of the information where it is loaded with number of memory traces. But if the information is not used, naturally that memory trace gets faded as the time passes. Suppose like if I ask you, can you remember your logarithms? How many of you say yes if you are not a mathematical student? You may say we forgot it around 10th class itself. The reason is now you are doing the graduation, probably nowhere you have used the logarithms. So, whatever you have learned at your school level, high school level regarding the logarithms, that information is lost because the information which was stored in the form of memory traces got faded because it was not used. Similarly, it could be with the other types of the information. So, it indicates the decay theory, the storage decay theory indicates it is use it or lose it. In fact, this was proved by Ebbinghaus through his forgetting curve. Ebbinghaus forgetting curve is very popular, very understanding and very significant. If you just look at this graph, participants were asked to learn and then retain the information. Then they were asked to remember the information every day, that is starting from first day to 30th day. So, this graph indicates that first few days the information was quickly forgotten. The amount of information that was forgotten was very fast, but after 5th day till the 30th day, whatever information lost was less amount of information. This indicates that immediately after our initial learning, if the information is not rehearsed, not given attention, there would be a quick drop of the information, and later on whatever we lose, that would be very little amount of information. So, this is called as Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. Another important reason why we forget the information is, it is not only because of lack of encoding or lack of proper storage, it could also be because of the retrieval failure. We may be having the information in our long term memory, but unfortunately we are not able to retain it because the information is not accessible to us. Sometimes we feel like we know the information, but we are unable to say the information. But if any clue or if any hint is given, immediately we are able to get that information back. But unfortunately, in all the situations, we may not be presented with the retrieval cues. Then another reason why we forget is interference theory. Interference theory proposes that forgetting is due to other information in memory interfering. So, it could be two types of interference: proactive interference, retroactive interference. In proactive interference, old information interferes in the recall of newly stored information. On the other hand, in the retroactive interference, newly stored information interferes with the retrieval of previously stored information. For example, to make you understand this concept, just look at this slide. You have learnt one list, say list A. When you are trying to recall list A, what is happening is whatever you have learnt from the list B, that is interfering in the recall of list A. So, that means there is a memory loss for A. This is called retroactive interference, that is new learning interfering with the old memory. Contrast to this is proactive interference. You have read list A, you have read list B, but when you are asked to take a test or recall the contents of the list B, unfortunately, you are unable to remember the list B contents, as contents of list A are interfering with the list B. This is called proactive interference, old learning interfering with the new memory, and this happens especially when there is a similarity in the both the lists. It could be the meaning, it could be the theme, it could be the language, or it could be the poem. If there is a high similarity, there would be high interference. Another reason for forgetting is loss of cues. We can say cue dependent theory. According to this theory, forgetting occurs due to the unavailability of the retrieval cues. If we can provide the retrieval cues, probably we can locate the information that is stored in the long term memory. The reason why we are unable to remember much of the information that has happened between 3 to 6 years of age is there are no retrieval cues as to remember that information that has happened during this part of the period. Some other concepts related to forgetting is motivated forgetting. The moment I say motivated forgetting, I think you can easily remember one of the significant persons associated with it. Who is he? Sigmund Freud. He says we repress painful memories to protect our self-concept and to minimize our anxiety levels. However, though consciously we do not remember some of the information, either through probing in the therapy or through hypnosis, we can bring back this repressed information also, but otherwise consciously we do not remember this repressed information. Another phenomena associated with forgetting is memory construction. Don't you think that we try to add our own creativity and reasoning in generating, in trying to remembering the information or trying to narrate the information? Most of the times it happens. If you observe, you have seen an accident, and when you pass on this information, when you try to share this information with one of your friends, knowingly or unknowingly, you try to use some additional information. So, how this happened? Is it like you are giving the actual precise accurate information to your friend, or without your knowledge some additional information has taken place within this description? Definitely, in most of the cases, without our knowledge, memory construction takes place, because we try to fill in the gaps, we try to filter some information. All these processes make us add or delete some information and construct our own memories of a particular incident. Another important phenomena associated with forgetting is misinformation and imagination effects. Generally, these concepts are related to the eyewitness testimony, where the witness's memory plays a crucial role. Most of the time, if you observe, eyewitnesses reconstruct their memories when questioned about the event. For example, if you just look at the slide, there are two cars just hit each other in the first part of the slide. where it is written depiction of actual incident. But when people who had seen the film of a car accident later on asked a leading question, that is how the question is presented to them, they recalled a more serious accident than what they had witnessed. So, the situation here is two cars just hit each other, but after few hours of the incident, after few hours of this film watching, when the participants were asked a leading question like about how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other. So, the memory construction was the second part of the slide. They almost imagined as if like the incident, it was both the cars collided each other and the major accident took place. So, sometimes depending upon who is asking the question, how it is presented also, the narration of our own memory affects. Either we try to give more details than that is required, unnecessary details, or sometimes whatever is there that we may not be able to remember and generate the other information. And this is what is happening with the eyewitness testimonies in the courtrooms. That is the reason why people still doubt the accuracy of the eyewitness testimony. Then source amnesia is another important phenomena related to forgetting. Source amnesia is also called as source misattribution. It is the attribution of an event to the wrong source that we have experienced, heard, read or imagined. You can say it is misattribution of the information. Source amnesia along with the misinformation effect is the major source for many false memories. Why we experience false memories is the reason is the source amnesia, that is we try to misattribute the information and land up with giving the inaccurate informations. Once we have understood this forgetting, the causes of forgetting, some of the phenomena related to this forgetting, there are memory dysfunctions too. I think you might have heard about these memory dysfunctions. The very important thing is Alzheimer's. Initially, it was considered as the disease which was occurring only in the old age because of the progressive degeneration of the memory loss. But unfortunately, nowadays even in the late 40s, we are seeing the cases of the people getting affected with the Alzheimer's. Initially, it looks like as if there is a general loss of information regarding the day-to-day events, but if that is not seriously taken up and if we are not diagnosing the reason behind it, that may be actual symptom of the Alzheimer's. In fact, few decades back, the first Ronald Reagan, President of America, was found to be the first case of this Alzheimer's disease. So, this is one memory dysfunction. Amnesia is another disease of loss of memory. There are two types of amnesia, anterograde amnesia and retrograde amnesia. In the anterograde amnesia, there is a loss of memory for the events that have occurred after the injury. So, after the accident has taken place and if the person was left with a injury, so after the incident whatever has occurred, the person was unable to recall it. Contrast to this is the retrograde amnesia, where prior to the injury whatever information is there, the person is unable to recall. That is, in the retrograde amnesia, there is a loss of memory of information that has happened prior to the injury. Another memory disorder is Korsakoff syndrome. This is commonly found among the alcoholics, where their short-term memory is seriously impaired. Now, once we have understood these memory dysfunctions, which are mostly the clinical cases, which may not happen with everyone, in general, to improve our own memory system, what can we do? We know what is forgetting, we know the causes of forgetting. Then is there any way to improve our own memory systems so that we can function in an effective way? Definitely the answer is yes. We can improve our own memory systems by following certain techniques. There are number of techniques. You have to choose in which context, for which situation, which technique can be utilized. So, one important technique is keyword technique. This technique will be very effective if you are learning a foreign language and if you want to improve the memory of your foreign language. Suppose like you are learning Spanish, you want to remember the word pato. Pato means duck. So, how you try to remember that in Spanish pato means duck? So, try to see the similar sounded word in English. Pato is sounding like a pot. So, pot in English is a keyword to remember the pato. If possible, you also imagine pato means duck. So, the duck is drinking water from the pot. It would be easy for you to remember the foreign language. So, keyword techniques are the better techniques to improve your foreign language skills. Then encoding specificity is another technique of improving memory. What is this encoding specificity? It states that where you have studied in the same room, if you take the examination, it will be very easy for you to recall the information, but all the time it may not be popular, it may not be feasible, because you may be reading at home, but you will be taking the test in the school or a college. So, naturally one suggestion is, when you are reading, if you are trying to frame certain questions from your topics, if this question comes, how should I write? So, frame mentally some of the questions, imagine that you are writing answers to these questions or the structure of the answers, so that when you get the similar question in the examination, you will find that similarity of the place, that is where you have studied and where you are writing, mentally you try to see the similarity and you would be improving your answers. That is encoding specificity. Another important technique is organization clues. It is not just sufficient if you just go on reading or just attend to the information. You need to organize the information. In fact, the rationale behind power learning is prepare, organize, work, evaluate and think. So, this information can be organized in different ways, either by using your chart systems or either by trying to associate with other similar words, whatever it is, or trying to organize the information in the hierarchies. All this can be helpful in improving your memory. Then another important technique is effective note making. When people listen to the lecture, they just note down everything that is said by the speaker, that is, it could be a teacher. But here first you try to listen what the other person is saying, try to think and then put it on the paper only the very important significant points. That will make you attend to the important information that you have heard or that you have attended to, and that can be retained in a more effective way. So, note making skills have to be learned, they have to be practiced. Then when I said practice, practice and rehearsal is also one important technique, especially if it is something like formulas, if it is something like a poem, you have to rehearse it. But when you are rehearsing, if you can also use the imagination, that improves your long term memory. Then another important technique to improve memory is knowledge of results. Always it is better to get the feedback to improve our ability in enhancing the further skills. So, once you have seen your own assessment or the feedback that you got from your friends or from your teachers, you will be knowing where and how we have done the mistake. That will help you to focus on the lapses and then improve your memory. Then there is SQ3RRR method, that is SQ3R method. When you are reading, first you survey. Suppose if it is a subject of psychology, if you are reading a book, what this whole book is about, how many chapters are there, what are the basic contents of this chapter. Then you question, is it necessary to read the complete book, or only some chapters are more important to me from the examination point of view, or for understanding the subject. So, you are questioning why you have to select only few topics, what is the rationale behind it, and then once you have done the survey and questioning, the first R is for read. Read that lesson completely with note making or with underlining. Then once you have completed the chapter, that particular chapter, you recite it, that is just put the book aside, try to imagine or scribble on a paper the very important points, whatever you have understood, the theme of the chapter. Then after few days, probably at the end of the week, you try to rehearse it, that is read, recite and rehearse. So, the rehearsal could be a second reading, where it helps you to give more additional information if you have missed anything, if you are not able to remember anything. This rehearsal will help you to get in more information. So, if you can thoroughly use this SQ3R technique, not just before the exams, but once your academic year starts, definitely that would yield better results. Then another important technique which you all know is mnemonics, that is using method of lossy, where you are trying to whatever you want to remember, like how we have discussed in the earlier example of remembering the vegetables. You try to imagine that the whole form is filled with number of vegetables, different varieties of vegetables that you have to remember. So, similarly here in the method of lossy, you can imagine, you can visualize the objects that you have to remember. If possible, see the interaction between the objects, so that it would be having a lasting impact. So, mnemonics will be an effective strategy. Last but not the least, there is a mind mapping technique also. This mind mapping technique is not a new one. It was something like where we use the flow charts and other diagrammatic pictures when we were in school. But in the mind mapping, we take a central concept, we try to have number of branches and sub branches using different colors, so that when you are just not scribbling the content, verbal content, but you are also putting them in a diagrammatic form using the colors, both your left hemisphere and right hemisphere will coordinate and makes you remember what you have written on the paper in a more effective way. So, hope you would try all these memory improvement techniques and improve your memory. Do well in the exams and also in the life.